your answer to that question of why you're participating would be wonderful. And you can, during the course of the webinar, please go ahead and submit your questions, again, using the GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll try to answer them as we go along. And if I don't get to them during the actual presentation, I'll make sure that they're answered at the end. Okay. So as you may or may not know, this webinar is available for AIA continuing learning units. So if you need a completed certificate, or if you're a non-AIA member and you also need a certificate, just go ahead and email the address that's presented at the end of the presentation, and we'll make sure that you get one. Okay, so our presentation will have essentially 3 parts. One will be just a high-level overview and intro to CHPS Verified, and then we'll follow with a more detailed look at the CHPS Verified review process, and then we'll get the perspective from the reviewer, some items that will help make the process easier and faster for both you and the reviewer. And then finally, we'll end with questions. So, in case you don't know, what is CHPS Verified? It's a project review and verification protocol designed specifically for K-12 educational facilities. CHPS helps the design teams manage the design and documentation process. We do that by providing tools for project oversight, plan review, and a number of additional resources. And we'll go through all of this during the course of the webinar. Okay. It also ensures that each project has the required performance features. And why do you want these performance features? So that you can get the benefits of having the high-performance school, which include improved health, productivity, and performance of students and staff as well, while decreasing operating costs and increasing efficiency. Just on a very high level, what do we mean by verified project? What are the components of a verified submission? So what happens is that a third-party reviewer will check a number of documents, both after design of your project and again after construction. Those documents include construction documents that you would typically create during your construction process, scorecards or workbooks, and additional supporting documentation. This may be things like photographs, some calculations, and we'll go through this in a little bit. The idea of a verified project is that the accountability is not just with the school district and the design team, but it is also on CHPS and the assigned reviewer. A little bit about what types of projects are eligible for CHPS Verified, and there are a range of types. So it can be a new school or a new campus, just a single new building on an existing campus, or major modernizations. So it's applicable for all 3, and even for a project where you may have a combination of a new building and a major modernization. They can all be qualified under the CHPS Verified program. And in what states does CHPS do the CHPS verification? That would be California, and this shows the addition of the CHPS. There are a number, and we'll go through that in a minute. California, Massachusetts, Texas, Colorado, Virginia, Hawaii. And last year we added basically the rest of the U.S. with what's called U.S. CHPS. And so There are a few states where CHPS itself does not do the verification. It's done through CHPS partners or it's done independently. Rhode Island and New Hampshire, the CHPS verification process is done within the state. And in Washington and New York State currently, they also run their own independent programs. They license off of CHPS. Okay. So one of the things you'll note if you've done CHPS projects in the past is that the criteria are changing. They're being updated. And that is, to some extent, going to impact the verification process, what's required, the criteria. So there may be some new things to learn as if you're familiar with the old criteria. Now we're moving to the new. So the newest criteria are based on the new National Core Criteria, actually version 2. And it is the basis for the current U.S. CHPS criteria, the 2014 California CHPS, the Northeast CHPS version 3.0, and in October, it'll be the 2015 Texas CHPS. The National Core Criteria gives a base for future state adaptations. It is a 200-point base, but then you get 50, there are 50 additional points that are distributed by the state or the region. So there's a total of 250 points. We'll go over the point structure. This is very different from the way CHPS has had a point structure in the past. And you'll see that in a little bit. I'll have a table with comparison. So just so you can see the states that have the custom CHPS criteria. So the documents that are listed, the pictures there, are for the states or regions that have their own criteria based on either version 1 or version 2 of the core criteria. And the darker orange are all covered by U.S. CHPS. One exception you'll see here is Colorado, which is in the lighter orange, but doesn't have its own version of CHPS. Just this past July, the state of Colorado opted to use U.S. CHPS as for their state. So they're still referencing CHPS, but it'll be U.S. CHPS as opposed to a specific Colorado CHPS version, which they've had in the past. So I talked a little bit about the point structure and how it's changing. So what you can see here, and I may take a little time going through this, is that the top two rows have, they say points and then they have a slash and then another word in bold. Okay, so the prerequisites in the past did not have points. Okay, there were no points associated. So the bold numbers are number of prerequisites. Okay, so there were 25 prerequisites in Hawaii and there are 23 prerequisites in Virginia, whereas for the other states and versions listed, those are actual points. Okay, those are points out of 250. And the same thing for the credits. Again, just to keep it simple, there were 60 credits in Hawaii and 61 in Virginia, and all the points available in those states are associated with the credits. Okay, so we're trying to get a consistent basis for the points available and the number of points required for verification or verified leader, and this simplifies not just for us but for you as well. Okay, it was getting very complicated for everyone, where depending if you worked in multiple states, not only did you have different credits, but you had different levels that needed to be achieved and different requirements within the credit categories. So we're working to simplify this. And you'll see throughout this webinar that there are a number of ways that we're working to simplify the process for you, but still keep it rigorous. Okay. One of the other things that we've also done to help simplify and put everything on an even basis is that all of the versions of CHPS now have the same categories. In the past, there were 2 categories: leadership, education, innovation, and climate. They're the bolded ones on the slide here. Those 2 are no longer standalone categories, but they've been incorporated either into the integration, innovation, or the energy category for the most part. So every version of CHPS now has the same 7 categories: integration and innovation, IEQ, energy, water, sustainable sites, materials and weights, and a new one, which is operations and metrics. Okay. So that's that was a 1,000-foot view of CHPS Verified. Now we're going to go more detail into the process and what's involved. So this is an overview of the project documentation, and we'll go into this in more detail in a little bit. So the project documentation, moving forward, the main document is going to be what's called a project plan sheet workbook. Right? If you are familiar with the workbooks in the past, there were a number of templates, and then there was a tab for every single credit. We've modified, and the new workbook has a completely different structure, and I'm going to hold off to go into that. So for our verified project, the documentation, you complete the project plan sheet workbook, compile the construction documents. This includes plan sheets and specs, a lot of the standard documentation that you would have during construction, and compile attachments, again, like photographs or letters, signed letters showing compliance with one of the credits, and then you submit the project it via the project website. And again, we'll go into details on all of this in a minute. So starting with the documentation, we went ahead and we streamlined the documentation. The idea is we wanted to help reduce the net cost of the documentation while maintaining the rigor. So in doing this, we wanted to simplify, but also increase the transparency. So in a nutshell, it should be a simpler process for you. It shouldn't be as onerous as it's been in the past, and it should also be simpler on the CHPS and reviewer side, and it should speed up the process of getting your projects through the verified. So when we say simplified and increased transparency of documentation, what does that mean? It means we've laid out all the documentation criteria, documentation requirements within the criteria. Okay, so you don't have to go hunt and search for it. It's in there. There's a section that tells you specifically the documentation that's required, when it's required, whether it's the design review phase or the construction review phase, or in some cases the performance review phase. Okay, and we've taken a plan and spec approach where we're trying to rely on construction documents to the greatest extent possible. Okay, and we've also provided a couple of additional tools to help with the process. These are not tools that you'll submit to us, but they're tools available to you to help you get through the process. One of them is a scorecard, and one of them is a documentation summary. And we'll go through all of these right now. All right. So the first one is the CHPS project workbook plan sheet. We're still getting used to the new name, so we may call it multiple things. So that's why it's in here both ways. So our intent here is to minimize the paperwork by leveraging what is typically created and used during a design and construction project. So we have fewer additional CHPS-specific documents and sheets. There are 2 or 3 full-size plan sheets, and when we say full-size plan sheets, we're talking like 30 by 42 inch, 36 by 48 inch. They're designed to be printed out and incorporated into your standard documentation. Okay. So there's one plan sheet that is really designed for the design process, including the review, where you lay out the credits. It has all the credits on the page. You can indicate which ones are being pursued, and then what documentation is needed. Are there other notes that you want to pass on to some of the construction workers so they understand what's required for the process? You know, make sure that you retain X, Y, Z. Okay, because we're going to need that. Or if you can, take a picture of, you know, A, B, or C. Okay, so So again, so wherever possible, we try and cross-reference the construction documents, both in the prereqs and in the credits. There is some additional documentation required, and a lot of that you'll see in the integration and operations and metrics category, because those are, we call those the bookends of the CHPS criteria. The integration process is before you even start designing the project. It's getting everybody on the same page. Okay, so everyone who's going to be involved in the project, from the occupants of the building, facilities workers, architects, construction workers, the community, anyone involved, that's it. The idea is to get everyone together so they're all working as a cohesive unit. And then so in that case, there's not going to be a lot of your standard CDs available. So that's other types of documentation that's requested, mostly letters and for verification of things that meetings have occurred. And then on the back end, we have our operations and metrics. This is to say, we built the project. Now we want to ensure that we still have a high performance building. Again, we're not going to delay the verification of the building until we have a year's worth of data, but we want to see a letter that you're committing to go ahead and do certain things, where you have a manual for maintenance and things along those lines. So those are a little bit new. And again, the other thing you can do is you can actually designate who's going to be the documenter during the construction. So those are a number of reasons why we've decided to take this approach. We also do have a few spreadsheets for some calculations to take place within this template, and those are at the construction review phase, but there may be a half dozen to a dozen of those depending on which version of CHPS you'll be working on. Again, I just want to point out, this is a new document for us. So if you're using one and you find anything that doesn't seem to be working right or doesn't make sense, please let us know, because we do want to make this a robust document that works well for you and for us. Okay, so that's the main documentation that you'll be submitting to CHPS. Other documentation that's available to you and is available before you register a project. I didn't mention, but the CHPS project work plan sheet is available to you once you've gone ahead and registered your project. That's your tool to use during the process. However, before you register, we do have a couple of other documents to help you. One of them is the CHPS project scorecard. This is a single tab document. It's an outline of all the criteria with the prerequisites, the credit points. It indicates during what phase you will need to have documentation completed and what type of documentation that may be. So if you can read it, I know it's a little small. So PS1 would be plan sheet 1. CD is construction documents, and A is attachment. There may be a couple of templates, but there are very few of those. It can be used to track progress and assign responsibility for each credit if you want to do that independently of the plan sheet or in addition to when you're planning out the project, just thinking of how you might want to go through it. You can also use it to assess the viability of the project. Will you be able to achieve enough points? Okay, and this is particularly useful when you're doing a modernization project. It allows you to estimate the cost and also lets you estimate whether you'll be eligible for a verified leader project as opposed to just a verified project. So this is a really good tool. It's freely available on the website. If there isn't one now, there will be one for every version of the CHPS criteria. So again, we're in the transformation process. There is one for the 2014 U.S. CHPS. There is one for California. There is one for the Northeast. And we're developing the new one for Texas. So that covers most of them. Okay, so that's a tool that's available for download on the CHPS website. Okay. The second piece of documentation that we have that, again, is freely available to you. You can access it at any time you want on the CHPS website, is the project documentation summary. And that's puts into a single Excel page. It's a very long page, but a single Excel page. All of the documentation requirements for the different phases of the project. So you can see here there's, reference specifications requiring compliance with the necessary codes, including testing of rooms for compliance. That was EQ 15.1. So it gives the details of what's going to be required for the design documentation. Again, this lets you plan ahead so you know in a single snapshot what the requirements are going to be for the documentation without having to go through all of the individual criteria. Like I said, again, this is available. It'll help you assess the project, assign who's going to be collecting which documentation, and the like. Okay. The other piece that we mentioned is CHPS Verified attachments. Again, these will be things, like I said, letters and some reports, like if you have a commissioning report, JPEG pictures showing where your walk-off mat, your walk-off mats in place. These are just examples. What we would like to see, because it really does speed up the process for us, is if you can create a single PDF for each category and provide that documentation so that it's in the same order as the plan sheet or the scorecard. Or so you go through the credits. It'll start with the integration and innovation, and then you go down from 1 till 10, and then the same thing, IEQ 1 through 16, whatever the number happens to be. So if you just organize it, so that it follows the criteria itself, that helps a lot. Ideally, if you can bookmark and title the individual credits in PDF, again, this also helps. And then we're going to do everything, and we're going to review the project online after you've submitted it. So for this online process, we use something called Basecamp. Okay, you may or may not be familiar with it. If you've done a CHPS project a while back and haven't done one recently, Basecamp has been updated, so it looks different. It's a newer version, and it should be easier to use and hopefully a little bit more intuitive. It's a project tracking tool. It has things like timelines, to-do lists, reminders. It's where you can post files. It's where the communication occurs, the discussion track. And this allows for the coordination and communicating between the project team and staff. So we'll set up a project, a project file for your team, and you can go ahead and add additional personnel that you want linked into the project to have access to the project. And you don't have to ask us to add people to the project team. You can do this yourself. Okay. So the old version of Basecamp, the administrator had to do that. That's no longer the case. You can do that. Each team member will get their own individual login access. And again, this is where you'll submit the project documentation electronically, and then we can go ahead and review them online. There are also milestones and calendars, so you'll get reminders that, let's say you were in design review, we reviewed it, we sent it back to you for follow-up. You'll get a reminder that the resubmission is due within X number of days. Just that it's not to, we're not trying to pressure you, it's just a reminder to help you, because we know you're all very busy people. All right. So what does the project website look like? It's a little bit different than before. you can see there's in the top left, so you'll have your CHPS Verified project. It will give you your project name. And we're trying to add on there the version of the CHPS criteria you're using and whether it's a modernization or new building or a new campus. So you'll see there's discussions, there's to-dos, there's events, and then you can add files. The project updates are in there, so if you're a team member, you haven't been into the project in a while and you want to see what's going on, it'll give you the latest projects up there, and then you can see all of them if you want. There's discussions, to-do lists. Under invite more people, you can invite your own, again, team members there. So it's a very powerful website, and we would like this to be your means of communicating with CHPS, whether it's the CHPS or the verified reviewer. Using the Basecamp project for the communication just ensures a smoother process. It ensures that everyone involved with the project that needs to know something knows, so it doesn't go into somebody's email inbox and they forget to ask somebody else a question. So preferably if you go use Basecamp in the discussions feature, and you can choose who you're going to send a message to. So you can post the message to everyone on the project, or you can choose who you want to get the email. So if you just want to go to someone, your CHPS, that you don't have to include everybody else. So you don't have to spam everyone as it is with all kinds of extraneous discussions. You can be more tailored on who you want to send them to. So when you post a message, if you can just make sure though that you tag your CHPS contact, it should be a relatively smooth process, at least from the communications perspective, and that's where we wanted to start. And we want to encourage you to ask questions along the way, and we'll go into actual process here in a minute. But please, ask the questions. That's what we want. Oh, sorry, I'm going to back up a second here. We have a question. Anyone can add, if you're on the team, my understanding is that anyone can add team members. There is an overall administrator. That would be on the CHPS side. But team members can be added by any of the members of the project team. Now, I will go ahead and confirm that because I am not the Basecamp expert, but that is my understanding. But again, there is an overall administrator from CHPS. So if you wanted, for some reason, to not allow access to a certain person for some reason, I think there are ways to handle that. And yeah, somebody wrote the note. Yeah, Basecamp doesn't charge per user. There's, I don't think there's any charge to use Basecamp from your perspective. We pay the charge, yeah, because we're using it, but there's no charge to you to use Basecamp, so you can add as many users as you like, as necessary. You don't feel like if you add them, your fees will go up. That's not the case. So, yeah, so this is our primary means of communication, for the projects. So we really do encourage you, to ask questions. A lot of the questions we can answer very quickly and directly, so get you going on your way, get you over your oil speed bump, whatever it happens to be. Especially for the process questions. If you have a technical question, the first place to look is the CHPS criteria interpretation library. However, since we're going to new versions of CHPS, you might not find what you're looking for there. So if you don't, go ahead and ask your question for CHPS. It may be that the question is relatively straightforward. We can go ahead and give you a quick answer, right away, right through Basecamp. If it is highly technical and is specific only to your project and not something that is general, that is an error or an oversight in the criteria, you'll probably be asked to register the question as a CCI. Each project gets 2 free CCIs. So very few projects seem to have more than 2. If, however, the project was registered by a CHPS member, there is an additional 3rd free CCI. So that is one of the advantages for CHPS membership. I'm not going to go into that now, but you do get 2 free CCIs. If you need an additional one beyond your free, the cost is $250. We try and answer your questions as quickly as possible. We have our CHPS technical subcommittees, and in addition to other subject matter experts that we reach out to as needed. So we do try and get you the best answer possible and as quickly as possible. So please, ask your questions. There are no dumb questions. There are no, you're not bothering us. Please ask. It really does help both of us. It also helps us to see where, maybe things aren't clear, and we want to clarify the process for you. So we want to make this a good experience for you. We want it to be successful because we want these schools, to be high-performance schools. So let's talk a little bit about the verified review process. Again, the verified review process has changed a little bit, not so much in the timeline, but more with the fees and what happens at different phases. So you can see on the right side there where it says this is currently still the process in Hawaii, but it's legacy for all the other states. I'm not going to go into detail on that right now, but to talk about the current process. So on a very high level, during registration, when you register for the process, at that point in time, you'll be asked to pay the design review fee. Okay, the design review fee has also changed. It's much more simplified. It is not based on number of credits or size of building beyond, well, if it's a small project. So there's small project and all the other projects. So it's based on whether you're going for verified or verified leader and the type of project. Is it a whole campus, or is it just a modernization? So it's those types of things. It's laid out on the CHPS website in a matrix form. Again, if you have questions or need directions to that specific location on the website, just let us know. We'll send you there. And if you have any questions, again, just let us know. So when you register and you pay your design fee, that gives you access then to all the technical assistance. You'll get your plan sheet workbook. Your Basecamp project will be open, and you're free to start asking questions, even before you've submitted anything for design review. Again, the more questions you ask up front, we're hoping that simplifies the process for you. You get your questions answered early on so that you can go ahead and go right into design review and make that a very streamlined process. So there's very little, fewer resubmittals. We're asking for less, okay? And this is not, on the CHPS or reviewer side. This is to help you. We want you to be able to go through this process in a very fluid way without having a lot of hiccups. That's our goal, okay? So we have the design review. Once you get through the design review, and we'll go through this process right after this, you complete your design review, you go ahead, the building is built, construction. Then you go into construction review. So when you're ready to submit for construction review, at that time, you'll pay a construction review fee. In some states, particularly in Hawaii, there's a performance review phase. That is optional. It's not required. But if you choose to go through the project decides to go through the performance review, there is an additional performance review fee, and then there's recognition. So the performance review is actually waiting that time to get the operations and metrics data. Again, it's not a requirement for most states. but it is an option should you choose to go that route. So this is just a little flow diagram of the CHPS Verified program. You know, the phases, and there will be slides that go into detail on these. So you register the project. It indicates here whose responsibility different aspects are based on the color code, and this is in the Verified Users Guide, which you can also find online. We'll give you you'll get the web address for that at the very end. So stick around to the end, and we'll tell you where to find everything. Okay. So this project registration, there's 2 phases for design review and 2 phases for construction review, followed by a performance review if there is some, and then recognition. So let's go through this process in a little bit more detail. So the project registration, either the design team or the school district can register the project. Again, if you do so early, you get that access to all this technical assistance and the workbook. So you register online. The specific web page is indicated here. So you complete the form, and then you have the option. You can pay immediately by credit card, or you can request to be invoiced. So invoice is an option. Once you submit your payment, you get access again to the workbooks and the project website and to all the technical assistance. Okay. So the first phase, once you've registered and gone down your way in designing the project, is the design review. So the first step is that you'll submit your documentation and notify CHPS using Basecamp. So we've had people just post their documentation and forget to let us know, and we have a lot of projects, so we're not checking every one to see if somebody uploaded on a given day. So please, make sure you notify us when you upload your documentation. When you upload the documentation files, you'll have the option to email anyone on the project team. So just email CHPS, so we know it's there. So a reminder to I do upload one file with all the credits pursued for each category. It helps if you can name the files so that they're easy for us to recognize them. And we do recommend uploading complete sets of documents as opposed to one at a time. However, if you want to update them one at a time, just let us know when the final one is there. That's the important thing. Okay, and we really don't want to see hard copies, so no need to do that. Let's save the planet. Let's save some money. So once you upload, we go into what's called, it's a 2-phase process. Phase 1 is that the documentation will be reviewed for completeness to make sure that all of the required attachments are there. Okay, because there's a lot of documentation, and occasionally things are overlooked or they didn't get attached properly. So we'll take that look first and get back to you, let you know if there's any additional documentation, documentation was missed, or if everything's there, and we're going to proceed to what is then called compliance review. So during compliance review, that's when the documentation is reviewed to verify that the requirements for the different prerequisites and credits have been met. Okay, both phases follow a regimented review timeline, and we'll go through that in the next slide. And ideally, the review does need to be complete before construction begins. That's the ideal world. If for some reason that's not possible, let us know and we'll talk about it and see what we can do. So the standard design review timeline, the CHPS staff will review the documentation for completeness within 20 business days, and we do try and do that more quickly than that, but that's our maximum. That's what we're going for. And once that's complete, we'll let you know the outcome, and the project team will then be given an additional 20 days to gather up the additional documentation. If for some reason you need 20 days, the person that would provide the documentation is on holidays, somebody's sick, whatever it happens to be, if you can't meet the 20 days, just let us know. Just let us know that you're working on it. It's going to be a little bit longer, and we'll just note it. It won't be a problem. Okay? And this goes for any of those timelines where we're giving you X number of days to get back to us. Again, if you can't meet the deadline, just communicate with us and let us know, and we'll try and work with you so that we can continue with the process and it's not too much of a burden on anyone. Okay, so once we get the resubmittal, CHPS reviews again, but this time only in 10 days. And if again there's still something missing, well, that's fine. We'll let you know. 10-day windows, and then hopefully we want to minimize the number of iterations here, but we'll do this until we have the documentation complete. Then it's sent to the third party for the compliance review, and the compliance review has the same timeline. It's the 20 days for the initial review for compliance. The project team gets 20 days to respond, and as the continuation of the process there. So what is construction review? That would be the next phase. So there'll probably be a fairly large lull in our communication with what's going on as the construction process occurs. So ideally the construction process review takes place no later than 90 days after substantial completion. Again, if this will be a problem for some reason, let us know, communicate with us. That's the really important thing. Okay. So the first steps is, again, completing the templates. There are some worksheets, the plan sheets, and the attachments. Again, submit the documentation through Basecamp and let CHPS know. And once that's up there, we'll send you the invoice for construction review. And once payment is received, we'll start the construction review process. One thing, a couple of items. We do require a signature on the cover page of the documentation. And for the timeline, it's going to be exactly the same as it was for the design review timeline. Again, it's the two-phase process, completeness review followed by compliance review with the same, again, timing. And at the end, that's when the project's awarded the formal recognition. It's a letter and or plaque, depending on your state. Just a couple of top 10 things that will help make your project a success, help it go more smoothly and quickly, is register early. Again, that way you can get your questions answered sooner rather than later. Choosing the right level of points, whether you're going verified or verified leader, though we do understand that this could change during the process. Gather your resources, assemble your team, communicate the requirements to the contractors, and again, providing the plan sheet to help with this. It helps if you do assign one team member as the primary documenter. And talk to us. That's a big one. Talk to CHPS before and during the design review. Notify us when you're ready for review, and use your CCI. Okay. We also have a couple of additional resources to help with the process that are free and available on the website. There's the CHPS Verified Program User Guide, which goes through the registration process, the fees, the design and construction review process, and the CHPS credit interpretations. There's a recognition ceremony guide in addition to the CHPS Best Practices Manual. These are all available on the website and at no cost for the project for you. We also have the CHPS High Performance Products Database, which will help you find products that meet the requirements for the materials and waste credits, and that's at www.chips.net/products. Again, that's a free resource for you to use. And then we have a couple of other CHPS resources. We have our list of events. There are other webinars. I'm assuming and hoping that you've all taken the Intro to CHPS webinar, but if you have not, that would be a really good one to add. Also the operations report card, and there are state and region specific criteria. We also present at conferences, and we have trainings, and again, all of these will be found under www.chips.net events. Right. So, once you're verified, celebrate. Becoming CHPS Verified is a reason to celebrate. A commitment's been made to having a healthy, productive environment for our future generations, while conserving resources and minimizing our impact to the environment. So that's something to be proud of and to celebrate. Okay. Now we're going to go into some items. This is from the CHPS reviewer's perspective. This has been gathered just over the years, just some tips that will help. So, be organized, be consistent, highlight the pertinent information, label and identify. Try not to give us too much, it makes it harder to find, and we'll go through the innovation strategy, how to lay that out to ensure that it goes through and we can quickly approve it or provide comment. So just some examples of organization. This would be ideally how we would like to receive the projects in PDF form, so I know it may be tough. So we have the organization where we have the bookmarking, the credit names match up with, this is the old workbook, but you want the names to match. It makes it easier. So credit IIP2 educational display, IIP2 educational display. So having that match really does make everything go more quickly. And we're less likely to come back to you and ask you, where is such and such documentation? We can't find it. And here, these people were very diligent where they bookmarked not only each credit, but also each subcredit. The reviewer would be pleased if you could, at least bookmark each credit, but subcredits is great. For consistency, you want consistency between projects. So, for example, daylighting in classrooms and using classrooms. So the room names are consistent in this case. They're not. We have classroom grade 1 and classroom type 1. It's easier if we can match them up. Consistency so that, say, the square footage for the rooms are the same. That's what we're talking about, consistency. So consistency between credits, but also within credits. So this is one piece of documentation for daylighting in classrooms where it has classroom room number, and this is the output from, excuse me, from a model also for daylighting in classrooms, and it has the number up on top, and you want to make sure that they match. Okay? So that's within the credit. Another example is here where we have, energy efficiency. There's a little table that has the building square footage, and there's some written text. You want to make sure that those two match up. So also within here, so we have the student capacity and the staff capacity, total of 900 occupants. So we make the assumption 450 male versus 450 female, unless you're an all boys or girls school. So when you go ahead and fill in tables, make sure that having that consistent. Also between drawings and sketches, see solar panels and low emitting materials here on this drawing, and then same way to indicate on the other one. One of the biggest ones is highlighting. It does make it much easier to review the process, and again, that speeds up the process for you if you highlight. These are some examples of highlighting on schematic drawings, within specifications, on project submittals and cut sheets. And the documents, one thing that does help is we do like to see that submittals are actually signed and dated. Again, we're providing all this information to you so that we minimize the number of touch points, so we don't have to keep coming back to you asking you questions about what was submitted. Label your photographs. Ideally, if you can label, this is a very nice labeling of the project showing there's no emissions around an area where the air intakes are. So I know it takes a little bit longer, but again, it does make for a more efficient process. And the other thing is, we don't need all your documentation. So we don't feel like you have to provide us everything. We really only need the documentation for the points that you're claiming. In this example, 466 pages for 2 low-emitting materials credits. So probably more than we really needed. And then for the innovation strategy, if you lay out your support for your innovation credit with intent, what the requirement would be, and then the documentation required, that again makes the process much smoother. And just a little bit about resubmittals. When we do request more information, ideally the cover sheet should have a narrative for each credit. Again, one PDF file, also bookmarked, and only submit the new information. Please don't combine it with the original submission. That makes it, that becomes very difficult to follow. So please just resubmit a separate PDFs that you've already put together and bookmarked. And that completes our course here. It's a reminder that you are eligible for AIA credit. And now it's time for you to ask any questions. So, anybody have any questions? And if you don't have them now, but you think of something later, that's fine. Go ahead and contact us at verified@chips.net or call. There is more information on the website at www.chips.net/verified. Most of the documents that we discussed are there. So it does not appear that anyone has any questions. So going once, twice. All right, again, go ahead if you don't have your question now, but you come up with one later, please go ahead and contact us. Yes, the presentation will be available offline at afterwards. We should be posting both a recording of the webinar as well as the slide deck. So that will be available for your use. And we'll let you know when it is up and where to find it. Any other questions? Okay, well, again, thank you very much for attending the webinar, and we appreciate it. Hope you have a lot of success with your CHPS Verified project, and please let us know if you have any questions in the future. Thank you very much.